was a podcast where recently there were two evangelicals from America and two evangelicals from the UK. And they were kind of talking through this idea of freedom and power, and it was in the heart of the election. And one of the things that the British evangelicals brought to bear, they said, in America, you still have power. We don't. And we go about things very differently than you would. Do you think that is true of the UK right now, where they're at, not just America, but just the West in general? Do you feel like this is some blanket that's gone across all of it? And I know America is the great experiment that's gone on, and what goes on here has repercussions others, but in other places. But yet we've seen what happens in Europe also begins to make its way across the pond over here. So how have those within the EU or in Europe, in the UK, how have they understood this idea of freedom, and are they in a similar place that we're at today?
Remember when I said the scandal of the American churches? You got a huge majority. This is
Yes.
the only Western nation
Mm.
where evangelicals are a huge majority. Nowhere else. You visit any European nation, they're a tiny little minority. Now, it's fair to say most European evangelicals, if the ball is dropped, the apple is dropped, it will roll towards the left. Whereas here, it will roll much more towards the conservative side of things. So there are huge differences. But my concern is most Europeans don't understand America.
Mm.
You take the first of the 5 revolutions, the English, the French, the English, the American, the French, the Russian, and the Chinese. The first 2, to many people, look different. The English one failed, and the American one succeeded. But they're actually both the same in that both of them came out of the Reformation and went back to Exodus. The English failed, it was called the lost cause.
Mm.
The Americans succeeded, it was the winning cause in New England. But they're very, very close. But the trouble is it didn't succeed in England. So English notions of freedom are somewhat different.
Mm.
I would argue that the American, at its best, now let's put slavery in, the original sin, the ultimate contradiction. Let's put that in our thinking. Otherwise, someone else will chirp up and say that I'm totally wrong. But the American one was the closest to the scriptures in that sense. So it is the most like Exodus. It's the most fully developed one. Now, that doesn't mean evangelicals today are defending it well or even rightly, but at its best, it is the most like.
So, do you see the same with Europe as well?
Europe is a long, long way. I mean, the former Catholic countries like France, you have a secularism with an animosity to the gospel at its core. Let's broaden it again.
Yeah.
One of the great forces of our time is secularism. There have always been atheists. Psalm 14:1. The fool says in his heart, there's always been atheists. But European-style secularity, Solzhenitsyn, a hatred of God is more important than the economics of socialism. Where did this come from? Well, secularism is both a parasite on our best and a protest against our worst.
Mm-hmm.
Take the second, the French Revolution. You remember Diderot, we'll never be free until we strangle the last king with the guts of the last priest. Church and state, in collusion, both oppressive, so the revolution throws off both.
Mm.
You've never had that in America until the last generation. So the reactions now, the rise of the nuns, it's an American equivalent, somewhat moderate, to the European revulsion against corrupt state churches. I'm Irish.
Mm-hmm.
The collapse of the church in Ireland, the Catholic Church, is one of the most precipitous in all history. Why? A reaction to the appalling abuse of children in the Catholic orphanages.
Mm.
And we got to say, Lord, forgive us. Much of the rise of the nuns and the reaction against the faith is simply a reaction against us.